Former President Trump is in court where a gag order hearing has now concluded in his criminal hush money trial. Prosecutors allege Trump violated the gag order 10 times and are now filing a potential 11th violation after the former president talked about key witness Michael Cohen yesterday outside the courtroom.
And when are they going to look at all the lies that Cohen did in the last trial? He got caught lying in the last trial. So he got caught lying, pure lying.
The judge told Trump's defense team that a lack of evidence is causing them to lose credibility with the court, but didn't issue a ruling. If the judge does find Trump in contempt, it could give the former president anything from a warning to jail time. Now the case will move on to testimony, where first witness, former National Enquirer publisher David Pecker, will return to the stand. Prosecutors say he, Cohen, and Trump were involved in a scheme to catch and kill potentially damning stories about Trump to protect his presidential campaign. Trump has pleaded not guilty to falsifying business records to conceal a hush money payment to adult film actress Stormy Daniels before the 2016 election. And ABC News investigative reporter Olivia Rubin has been inside that court all morning. She joins us now from outside the courthouse, along with ABC News executive editorial producer John Santucci and ABC News legal contributor Brian Buckmeyer. Olivia, there were some tense exchanges during this hearing.
There were. This hearing was tense, Diane. It was quite combative, and it was honestly a bit of a difficult one for Trump's attorney, Todd Blanche, who, as you said in your open there, struggled putting forward evidence for the claims he was making about why Donald Trump was not violating the gag order in their view and was merely just responding to attacks or, attacking witnesses in the case, but not related to the case about other aspects, which in their view, they said would not be a violation of the gag order. But Juan Marchand, the judge, really was not seeming to buy any of the arguments that Todd Blanche was putting forward. He said, "You're not giving me any case law. You're not answering my questions." And in some, he said, "You are giving me nothing to hang my hat on." And that quote you hit on where he said, "You're losing your credibility with the court." Just to give you some sort of context around that, Judge Marchand basically gave Todd Blanche one last opportunity and said, "Is there anything else you want to give me here before we wrap this hearing?" And Todd sort of launched into this speech basically saying how they're dealing with 10 posts. And he said that Donald Trump has tried everything and is working very hard to comply with the judge's order, with the gag order. And Judge Juan Marchand cut him off as he was saying that and said, "Stop right there. You are losing all credibility with the court. You are losing credibility with the court right now," and basically concluded the hearing right then and there. And as you said, he did not issue a ruling. But if you were to go based on everything that was said in the courtroom just now, you cannot imagine that this is going to be a good ruling for Donald Trump.
As Olivia mentioned, the judge has decided not to rule from the bench on this. So what happens next in terms of this potential contempt ruling and this gag order?
So the opposite of ruling from the bench is writing an actual decision. And you look to the calendar that's coming up in the next few days for the judge. We know that he has a court calendar on Wednesday and then back to court for this trial on Thursday and Friday. So I would assume at some point in time, we're going to get a written decision. And I think what we're going to hear is how the judge is trying to compel the actions of Donald Trump to conform to that of the gag order. And he's got to figure out what kind of punishment will do that, whether it be $1,000 per fine as what the prosecution is asking for, or under the Judiciary Code for when it comes to contempt of order, potential of 30 days of jail. Now, that option is there, but I don't think we're going to be in the realm of jail time. I think it's going to stick firmly towards some kind of fine or a very harsh tongue lashing, so to speak.
John, we're watching this video moments ago, the former president leaving the courtroom. Often when he leaves, he stops and he talks to the cameras. This time, just a backwards wave and out the door. What's that tell you?
It tells you skedaddle and don't talk to a camera, because clearly we got in trouble by doing that. And that's exactly what happened in court. You know, Olivia and the team were noting earlier that it was those comments that Donald Trump made outside of court yesterday about Michael Cohen that added to now a potential 11th violation of the gag order. And listen, Donald Trump clearly, when he gets caught putting his own foot in his mouth, gets annoyed about it, right? I mean, he doesn't want to have a situation where somebody is doing a read back on his comments saying, you can't say this, you can't do that. And clearly, that's exactly what prosecutors did in court. And I do think the part of it, though Donald Trump will never admit it, it does play into what his aides and allies have been saying behind the scenes, which is, you gotta cool it. You got to back off. And, you know, obviously Trump is really walking a tightrope here, because though legally it's not good for him, politically he's got to lean into it, because it's the only argument he has right now, because he can't get out there and talk about any of the issues because of where he's stuck.
And let's talk about that, because prosecutors today in court said they are not yet seeking jail time for any of these gag order violations, though they could. But they said they think Trump is actually angling for that. Why?
There's no reason to think it. Just look at the email blast went out to supporters yesterday saying they want to put me in jail. They want to keep me here. Donald Trump is leaning in head first to all of this, right? Trying to build up the drama, build up the intensity. And that really is and has been the campaign strategy for 2024. Look at every time Donald Trump went to a courthouse, or in one case, a jailhouse in the Fulton County, Georgia case last year, leaning into it, releasing the mugshot from Fulton County. All of this is to build up the drama that Donald Trump, no matter what, would rather be out. He mentioned Pennsylvania today because that's where a primary is happening today. That's where Donald Trump claims he'd rather be, but can't be, because he's stuck here, because they're out to get me. He has often said that I'm standing in their way. The they, in his opinion, is referring to Biden and others, and them is his supporters. That is what Donald Trump is trying to build in all of these comments.
Brian, the center of the defense's arguments today was essentially that this is political speech. This is Donald Trump defending himself. This is how he communicates with his supporters. He's a presidential candidate. He's entitled to do that. The judge didn't seem to agree with most of that, at least based on his comments to the defense right before he left. But how careful does the judge have to be here, given he is dealing with a current presidential candidate?
He has to be very careful in terms of the punishment that he's going to hand down. I know that in Truth Social, correct me if I'm wrong, I think Donald Trump compared himself to Nelson Mandela. So to your point, trying to push that, like, I am being politically persecuted, I'm willing to go to jail. First and foremost, vastly different situation between Nelson Mandela and Donald Trump. I think you should go learn his history there. But I don't think the judge is going to be thinking, I'm going to hold him in contempt of court and put him in jail for any amount of time. I think what's going to happen is it's going to be, here's the reason why I did this. And I think when a judge says, you're not giving me anything to hang my hat on, he's basically saying, I want you to give me some kind of legal argument that I can point to when I write this decision to says, this is why you're right. But if the other side gives me something to hang my hat on and you do not, but only decision I can give is prosecutor laid this out, prosecutor proved it, defense laid it out, defense didn't prove it, I rule on the side that did.
Now, Olivia, when we come back, since the judge opted not to rule on this hearing, we come back now to the testimony portion of this trial. David Pecker, the former publisher for the National Enquirer, longtime Trump friend, is returning to the witness stand really any minute now. What are you expecting to hear from him?
Well, he's going to have about 3 hours on the stand today. Yesterday, he only had about 20 minutes to sort of lay out who he was for the jury. He talked about, how he ran the National Enquirer, this mode of checkbook journalism, basically buying stories that they were going to publish. And he spoke about how he was the one that would approve what stories went out and what stories did not in the ultimate publishing decision. The reason that's so crucial is so today he can get into the substance of his testimony, which is going to be about how he allegedly worked with Donald Trump's attorney, Michael Cohen, to catch and kill stories that were negative about Donald Trump so that they would not come out, and how he helped facilitate that $130,000 payment to Stormy Daniels so she would not tell her story. And he is the first witness that we're hearing from, Diane, in this case. So you have to imagine that he's going to be sort of a storyteller for the jury. And I would also point out his demeanor yesterday, Diane, was quite interesting when he took the stand, because remember, he walked right by in that courtroom his old friend Donald Trump and took the witness stand with a huge smile on his face. So it will be very interesting to see how it plays out in that courtroom today, with Donald Trump likely eyeing his old friend while he testifies.
And John, within the dynamic, there's also the aspect of, we've heard Michael Cohen talk about this issue. We've heard Stormy Daniels talk about this issue. David Pecker has never addressed this case until now. How significant is it for him to now be on the stand face-to-face with Donald Trump in the courtroom?
Well, in some ways, I'm shocked that these words came out of my mouth, but it's kind of devastating for Donald Trump, right? Because, in some ways, you knew Michael Cohen, you knew Stormy Daniels, you knew others that have turned around and written books or, have become TV commentators now attacking him. David Pecker is one of the very few people in this saga that is not someone that is still a friend. I mean, Olivia noted just the body language in the two of them yesterday. It's going to be hard. We really didn't get into this yesterday because of such a limited amount of time we had with court wrapping early. We just got into the basics: name, date, occupation, birth date, all of that stuff. We really didn't get into the heart of the case. So when we gavel in and get going shortly, We're going to hear all. And quite unfortunately for Donald Trump, it's going to be hard to hear a friend and a longtime ally of his spill all.
That said, Brian, the defense is expected to argue, one, that this wasn't illegal for a number of reasons, but one of the angles they're expected to take is that Donald Trump, as they said in their opening statements, he's a man. He's not just the president. He's not just a guy on TV. He's a man with a family and a wife. So how hard is it going to be for the prosecution to prove, even if they can go ahead and prove that this scheme happened, but that the intent was to protect his status as a presidential candidate and influence the election, and not to protect this man from having his family find out about these alleged affairs and hear these negative stories?
I think it's going to come down to the conversations with Pecker as well as Cohen. And from our understanding in the opening statements from the prosecution, some of these conversations are reportedly recorded. And so it comes down to, okay, if that's what the defense is arguing, and I think it's a great argument, but you got to be able to back it up with actual evidence and not just arguments. Okay, so when Pecker takes the stand, are we going to hear that Donald Trump came to him and said, you know what, I really love Melania. I can't let her hear about this. This would devastate the children. Think about what would happen to Barron. Or are we going to hear, no, just I want to win this election. I don't want people to hear about this because of the Access Hollywood tapes, because of the consistent Karen McDougal story, now Stormy Daniels. I want to win this election. Which Donald Trump are we going to hear? Now, if the defense comes with the argument that this is a man, a husband, a father, and that's not supported by the evidence, the same way the judge says you're losing credibility, it's going to happen in front of the jury, and that can be devastating come verdict time.
All right, Olivia Rubin, John Santucci, Brian Buckmeyer, thank you all. And we will be following this trial all day long. We will bring you updates as we get them right here on ABC News Live.